She's just a waitress I picked up in a diner." Harrison laughed, the sound echoing off the marble walls of the Met Gala's private dining room. The room, filled with New York's elite, erupted in polite, cruel chuckles. Beside him, Amelia adjusted her dress, her face burning, her eyes fixed on the floor. Harrison clinked his champagne glass against the rim of Isabella's, the daughter of the billionaire he was desperate to impress. He thought he had won. He thought Amelia was just the anchor, dragging him down, a prop for his rags-to-riches story. But Harrison didn't know that the man walking toward the stage, the reclusive billionaire host everyone was terrified of, wasn't just looking for an heir. He was looking for his daughter, and he was looking right at Amelia. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, embossed in gold leaf on stock so heavy it felt like a weapon in the hand. The Sinclair Winter Solstice Gala. It was the kind of event that didn't just require a ticket. It required a bloodline, or in Harrison Pembroke's case, a desperation so palpable it practically radiated off his rented tuxedo. Harrison stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in their cramped apartment in Queens, adjusting his cufflinks. They were fake gold bought from a street vendor in Canal Street, but under the dim hallway lights they gleamed with a convincing enough arrogance. "Amelia," he barked, not turning around. "We leave in 10 minutes. If you're not ready, I'm leaving you behind. I mean it this time." In the bedroom, Amelia sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands were trembling slightly as she smoothed down the fabric of her dress. It was a simple black gown, vintage, purchased from a thrift store in Brooklyn for $40. It lacked the sequins, the feathers, and the sheer audacity of the gowns that would be sweeping the floors of the Plaza Hotel tonight. But it fit her perfectly, hugging her slender frame with a quiet dignity that Harrison usually mistook for dullness. "I'm ready, Harrison," she said softly, walking into the living room. Harrison turned his eyes, raking over her with a critical, almost surgical detachment. He didn't look at her like a husband looks at a wife. He looked at her like a real estate developer inspecting a property that had serious foundation issues. "That," he sneered, gesturing vaguely at her silhouette. "That's what you're wearing to the biggest night of my career." "It's elegant," Amelia said, her voice steady despite the knot tightening in her stomach. "And it's all we could afford." "It's boring," Harrison corrected, stepping closer to fix her collar, his touch rough and impatient. "Look, Amelia, tonight isn't about you. It's about me. It's about Pembroke Logistics finally breaking into the inner circle. I need you to be invisible. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't eat the hors d'oeuvres like you're starving. And for God's sake, don't mention your job." Amelia worked as a freelance archivist, restoring old books and manuscripts. It was quiet, meticulous work that required a doctoral-level understanding of history and chemistry. Harrison called it dusting. "I know the drill, Harrison," she whispered. "I'm just the arm candy." "Hardly candy," he muttered, turning back to the mirror to admire his own jawline. "More like the anchor. But if I land the Sinclair account tonight, all of this changes. I'll finally be able to upgrade." He didn't say upgrade our life. He said upgrade. The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Amelia looked at him, merely looked at him. 3 years ago he had been charming. Ambition had looked like passion back then. Now it looked like a disease. He was consumed by the need to be someone else, someone richer, someone who belonged in rooms he wasn't invited to. "Let's go," he said, checking his watch, a knock-off Rolex. "The limo is downstairs, and try to smile. You look like you're going to a funeral." Maybe I am, Amelia thought as she grabbed her clutch. The ride to Manhattan was silent. Harrison spent the entire time on his phone, furiously texting Isabella Vance. Isabella was the vice president of acquisitions for Sinclair Enterprises. A woman known for her shark-like business tactics and her predatory taste in men. Harrison had been networking with her for months. Amelia knew it was more than networking. She had seen the messages pop up on his lock screen. "Can't wait to see you in a tux. Leave the little mouse at home." When the limousine pulled up to the plaza, the scene was chaotic brilliance. Flashbulbs popped like lightning storms, illuminating the red carpet in blinding bursts of white. The air smelled of expensive perfume exhaust fumes and raw money. Harrison's demeanor transformed instantly. The scowl vanished, replaced by a practiced, dazzling smile. He buttoned his jacket, squared his shoulders, and opened the door. "Showtime," he hissed at Amelia. "Don't embarrass me." They stepped out into the cold December air. Immediately the paparazzi shouted names, their lenses swinging toward the celebrities and tycoons exiting the cars ahead of them. When Harrison stepped out, the cameras didn't flash. A few photographers lowered their lenses, checking their lists, realizing he was nobody. Harrison's smile faltered for a microsecond, a crack in the porcelain before he recovered, grabbing Amelia's arm with a grip that was painful. He steered her toward the entrance, walking with a brisk, aggressive pace, as if walking fast enough could convince the world he belonged. "Harrison Pembroke," he announced to the woman at the check-in desk, his voice booming slightly too loud. "And guest." The woman, a severe-looking blonde with a headset, scanned her iPad. Her eyebrows lifted. "Pembroke. Ah, yes. Table 42. Near the kitchen." Harrison's face went red. "There must be a mistake. I was told I'd be at the gold-tier tables. I'm meeting with Isabella Vance." "Ms. Vance is at the head table, sir," the woman said, her tone dripping with professional dismissal. "Table 42 is what we have for you. Next, please." Harrison ground his teeth, guiding Amelia into the grand ballroom. It was a kaleidoscope of gold and crystal. Massive chandeliers, dripping with diamonds, hung from the frescoed ceiling. The centerpieces were towering arrangements of white orchids and peacock feathers. A string quartet played a hauntingly beautiful rendition of Vivaldi in the corner, though no one was listening. "Table 42. Harrison spat, navigating through the crowd of tuxedoed waiters. "Unbelievable. After everything I've done." They found the table. It was indeed near the kitchen doors, tucked behind a massive pillar that blocked the view of the main stage. The other guests at the table looked equally marginalized. A few junior accountants, a nervous-looking charity coordinator, and an elderly couple who seemed to have won a raffle. "Sit," Harrison commanded, pulling out a chair for himself but leaving Amelia to handle her own. "I'm going to find Isabella," he said, barely sitting down before standing up again. "I need to fix this seating arrangement. Harrison, maybe we should just stay. He looked at her with genuine disgust. "You belong at table 42, Amelia. You with your thrift store dress and your small life. I don't. I belong out there." He turned on his heel and vanished into the sea of silk and velvet, leaving Amelia alone. She sat in silence for a moment, the hum of conversation washing over her. She watched the kitchen doors swing open and shut, catching glimpses of the frantic staff inside. A young waiter rushed out, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. He tripped slightly on the edge of the carpet, the glasses wobbling dangerously close to disaster. Amelia's hand shot out, catching the edge of the tray, steadying it before it could tip. The waiter froze his eyes wide with terror. He looked down at her, expecting a reprimand. "Careful," Amelia whispered, giving him a warm, conspiratorial smile. "Heavy carpet. It catches everyone. The waiter blinked, stunned by the kindness. Thank you, ma'am. I'm new. You're doing great, she said. Just breathe. And tell Marcus in the kitchen that the soufflés need to come out in 5 minutes, or they'll deflate. The humidity in here is higher than usual because of the crowd. The waiter stared at her. How do you know Marcus and the soufflés? Amelia just winked, raising a finger to her lips. I read a lot. As the waiter hurried away, confused but grateful, Amelia leaned back in her chair. Her eyes scanned the room, not with the hunger of an outsider, but with the sharp, calculating gaze of a hawk surveying its territory. She watched Harrison across the room. He had found Isabella. The woman was stunning, wearing a dress that looked like it was made of liquid red mercury. She was laughing, her hand resting intimately on Harrison's bicep. Harrison was beaming, whispering something in her ear, gesturing back toward table 42 toward Amelia. Isabella glanced over her eyes, locking onto Amelia. She smirked, a cruel, cold expression, and whispered something back to Harrison. Both of them laughed. Amelia didn't look away. She took a sip of water, her expression unreadable. Laugh while you can, Harrison. She thought, her fingers tracing the stem of the glass. The night is young, and you have no idea who is paying for the champagne you're drinking. Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. A spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the grand stage at the front of the room. A man walked onto the stage. He was older, his hair silver, his posture commanding. He leaned into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed. "Welcome to the Sinclair solstice. Tonight is a night of revelations." Amelia watched the man on stage. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Hello, Father," she whispered into the darkness. The man on stage, Arthur Sinclair, wasn't just a billionaire. He was an institution. He was the architect of modern logistics, a man whose ships crossed every ocean and whose trucks traversed every continent. He was also a man famous for his reclusiveness. He rarely spoke in public, and his private life was a vault into which no tabloid had ever successfully pried. Yet here he was under a spotlight, looking out at a sea of faces he mostly despised. "Thank you all for coming." Arthur began, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "Most of you are here to see and be seen. Some of you are here because you owe me money, and a very few of you are here because I genuinely like you." A nervous ripple of laughter went through the crowd. "But tonight is special. Tonight I am not just hosting a party. I am concluding a very long, very private search." From his vantage point near the head table, Harrison Pembroke leaned forward. He was standing next to Isabella Vance, who was absent-mindedly stroking the lapel of his jacket. "What's the old man babbling about?" Harrison whispered. "He sounds dramatic." "Arthur loves drama." Isabella purred, her eyes still scanning the room for anyone more important than Harrison. "He's obsessed with legacy. He's probably announcing some new foundation or museum wing." "I've heard rumors," Harrison murmured, trying to sound knowledgeable. "They say he's looking for a successor, someone to take over the empire when he retires. That's why I'm here, Isabella. I'm going to prove to him that Pembroke Logistics is the future." Isabella chuckled a low, throaty sound. "Oh, Harry, you're adorable. You think you're here for a job interview. You're here because I was bored and you're entertaining. Arthur already has his eye on someone." Harrison's blood ran cold. Who could possibly?" "Shh," Isabella hissed, pressing a manicured finger to his lips. "Listen." On stage, Arthur Sinclair continued. "As many of you know, my life has been dedicated to building this company. But an empire without an heir is just a future ruin. For years it was assumed that my nephew Marcus Vance, Isabella's cousin, would take the reins. Arthur paused, and the room turned to look at a slick-haired, smug-looking man sitting at the head table. Marcus nodded, preening under the attention. Marcus is competent. Arthur said the word landing with the faint praise of a damp sponge. But competence is not vision, and vision is what Sinclair Enterprises requires. Marcus's smile froze. I had a daughter once, Arthur said, his voice softening the change in tone, so abrupt it was startling. Her mother, my late wife Sarah, died when she was young. I was a broken man. I threw myself into my work, and in doing so I neglected the most precious thing I had. The room was deadly silent now. This was the kind of vulnerability no one had ever seen from the Ice King of industry. My daughter Amelia left home when she was 18. She wanted nothing to do with my money, my world. She wanted to build something of her own with her own hands. We have been estranged for 12 years. At table 42 behind the pillar, Amelia Sinclair's breath hitched. She stared at her father, her hands gripping the tablecloth so tightly her knuckles turned white. But I have kept watch, Arthur continued, a note of pride creeping into his voice. From a distance, I have watched her struggle, and I have watched her succeed, not with flash, but with substance. She became a master archivist. She restores things that are broken, things that the world has forgotten. It is the most noble work I can imagine. Harrison, standing near the stage, felt a bizarre sense of déjà vu. Archivist. Restores things. The words echoed in his mind. Isabella, he whispered, confused. That sounds like my wife. Isabella scoffed. Your wife, the little mouse in the thrift store dress. Don't be ridiculous, Harrison. Arthur Sinclair's daughter wouldn't marry a mid-tier logistics manager from Queens. But she is an archivist, Harrison insisted. She restores old books. Coincidence, Isabella spat. Listen to the man. Arthur was pacing the stage now, his energy building. I realized that my daughter possesses the one thing that cannot be taught in business school. Integrity. A deep, abiding respect for history, for quality and for truth. And those are the qualities that will guide Sinclair Enterprises into the next century. Arthur stopped center stage. He looked out into the audience, his eyes sweeping the room, searching. Amelia, he said, his voice raw with emotion. I know you are here. I sent the invitation myself. I know I have no right to ask this of you. I know I have failed you as a father, but I am asking you now, not as a tycoon, but as a man who wants to make amends. Will you come up here? Will you take your rightful place? The spotlight began to move. It left the stage sweeping across the crowd, a blinding white eye searching for its target. People craned their necks, whispering furiously. Who is it? Is she here? The spotlight swept over the gold tables. It passed the silver tables. It moved toward the back of the room, toward the kitchen doors, toward the pillar that blocked the view. It stopped on table 42. It landed squarely on Amelia Pembroke. For a moment, the world stopped. The ambient noise of the room, the clinking of glasses. The whispers vanished. Amelia sat frozen in the cone of light, her thrift store dress suddenly looking like the most important garment in the room. Harrison's jaw dropped. He stared at his wife, then at the stage, then back at his wife. The connection finally snapped into place in his brain, hitting him with the force of a physical blow. Amelia Sinclair. Amelia. His Amelia. No, he whispered the word, strangling in his throat. It's not possible. Beside him, Isabella Vance looked like she had swallowed a lemon, her face drained of color. That thing behind the pillar. That's Arthur's daughter. Amelia slowly stood up. She didn't look at Harrison. She didn't look at Isabella. She looked straight ahead at the man on the stage. She began to walk. The walk from table 42 to the stage was less than 100 feet, but it felt like 1,000 miles. Every eye in the room was fastened onto Amelia. The whispers had turned into a roar of speculation. Who is she? She looks so ordinary. Isn't that the woman whose husband was hitting on Isabella Vance? As she walked, Amelia felt a strange calm settle over her. The anxiety was gone, replaced by a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't hiding anymore. She passed Harrison. He was still standing there, his mouth agape, looking like a fish pulled onto a dock. As she walked by, she paused for just a second. She didn't say anything. She just looked at him. Her eyes were not angry or vindictive. They were just profoundly, heartbreakingly disappointed. It was a look that said, I tried to show you who I was, but you never bothered to look. Harrison flinched as if she had slapped him. He reached out a hand, a weak, reflexive gesture. Amelia. Wait. She kept walking. She reached the steps of the stage. Arthur Sinclair hurried down to meet her. The formidable Ice King was trembling. He held out his hand, not as a handshake, but as a plea. Amelia hesitated. 12 years of slaunts of pain, of feeling like an orphan with a living father, stood between them. I didn't come for your money, Arthur, she said, her voice quiet but amplified by the microphone he was holding toward her. I know, Arthur said, his eyes shining. That's why you're the only one I trust with it. He took her hand. It was a tentative grip, a father learning how to hold his daughter again. He led her up the steps to the center of the stage. The spotlight widened to encompass them both. Ladies and gentlemen, Arthur announced, his voice cracking with pride, I present to you my daughter, Amelia Sinclair, the future CEO of Sinclair Enterprises. The room erupted. It wasn't polite applause this time. It was a cacophony of shock awe and a desperate sudden need to suck up to the new power in the room. People stood clapping furiously. Photographers who had ignored her arrival were now practically climbing over each other to get a shot of the new heiress. From the floor, Harrison watched it all happen through a haze of disbelief and rising panic. He saw the faces of the people around him change. The sneers were gone, replaced by calculating looks. They were already trying to figure out how to gain favor with Amelia. Isabella Vance had vanished. She had slipped away into the crowd, realizing her miscalculation was catastrophic. She had bet on the wrong horse, and worse, she had openly mocked the winner. Harrison stood alone. He felt stripped bare. His rented tuxedo felt cheap. His gold cufflinks felt like plastic. His entire identity, the ambitious, self-made man, the charmer, the future tycoon, crumbled into dust. He realized that for 3 years he had been living with a diamond and treating it like a piece of gravel. On stage, Arthur was beaming. He handed the microphone to Amelia. Say something to them, my dear, he urged. Amelia looked out at the crowd. She saw the faces of the people who despised her 10 minutes ago. She saw the greed, the envy, the sudden terrifying respect. Thank you, she said, her voice clear and steady. I am surprised to say the least. My father and I have a lot to discuss." She paused, and her eyes found Harrison in the crowd. He was small now, insignificant among the titans of industry. "But I will say this," she continued. "Tonight has been a very educational evening. I have learned a lot about value, about what is real and what is just. Costume jewelry." A murmur went through the crowd. Everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. "Sinclair Enterprises has always stood for quality," Amelia said, finding her rhythm. "For authenticity. Under my leadership, that will not change. In fact, it will become our guiding principle. We will stop chasing the flashy, the loud, the superficial. We will focus on what lasts. We will restore what has been broken." She looked at her father, and for the first time in 12 years, offered him a genuine smile. "And perhaps," she added softly, "we will start with ourselves." The applause that followed was thunderous. It was the sound of a new era beginning. As the applause died down, Arthur leaned into the microphone again. "Now I believe dinner is served, and I think we need to make some adjustments to the seating chart. Amelia, my dear, please join me at the head table." He gestured for the waitstaff. "And get table 42, a better view. They seem to have been overlooked." Amelia walked with her father toward the head table. As she passed the stunned Marcus Vance, who was hastily vacating his seat of honor, she didn't even glance at him. She sat down next to her father. The view from the head table was magnificent. The entire ballroom was spread out before her. "I'm proud of you, Millie," Arthur whispered, using her childhood nickname. "We'll see Arthur," she replied, picking up her linen napkin. "Don't think this means I forgive you for everything. You have 12 years of missed birthdays to make up for." Arthur chuckled a genuine sound of relief. "I have a very good personal shopper. We'll start tomorrow." Meanwhile, back near the kitchen, Harrison Pembroke was still standing. A waiter bumped into him. "Excuse me, sir," the waiter said brusquely. "You're blocking the path." Harrison looked around. He was alone. Isabella was gone. The people he had been trying to impress were all looking toward the stage, toward his wife. He started to walk toward the head table. He had to fix this. He had to explain. He had to tell Amelia that he loved her, that he had always known she was special. He reached the edge of the dance floor. A large security guard with a headset stepped in front of him. "Sir, the head table is for VIPs only." The guard said, his voice flat. "But that's my wife up there," Harrison stammered, pointing. The guard looked at Amelia, who was laughing at something her father said, looking radiant and untouchable. Then he looked back at Harrison, taking in the sweaty brow, the cheap tucks, the panicked eyes. "Doesn't look like it from here, buddy," the guard said. "Back to your seat." Harrison looked at Amelia one last time. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking towards the future, a future that no longer included him. He turned around and began the long walk back to table 42 near the kitchen doors, where the noise of the clattering dishes drowned out the music. The sun rose over Queens with a harsh, unforgiving brightness. Harrison Pembroke woke up on the couch, still wearing his tuxedo trousers, his shirt unbuttoned and stained with sweat. His head throbbed with a rhythm that matched the dread pooling in his stomach. For a brief, delirious second, he hoped it had been a nightmare. Maybe he hadn't been publicly shunned. Maybe his wife wasn't the secret heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire. He rolled over and grabbed his phone. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications. Twitter. Mysterious Sinclair heiress revealed who is Amelia Pembroke. LinkedIn 45 notifications. Mostly people retracting connection requests. Voicemail. 3 missed calls from his business partner, Greg. Harrison groaned and sat up. The apartment was silent. Too silent. He walked to the bedroom. The closet door was open. Amelia's side was empty. Not just empty of her things. Her thrift store dresses, her worn-out boots, the stack of books she kept on the nightstand, all gone. She hadn't just left. She had erased herself. "Fine," Harrison muttered, though his voice shook. "She wants to play hardball. I'm the one who knows business. She's just a librarian." He showered, scrubbing the shame off his skin, and dressed in his best suit. He had to get to the office. Pembroke Logistics was a small firm, but they had been banking everything on the Sinclair contract. If he could just spin this, if he could frame it as a misunderstanding or a private marital spat, he might still salvage the deal. After all, he was the husband. Spousal privilege had to count for something. He drove to the office in Midtown, rehearsing his speech. When he walked in, the atmosphere was funereal. The receptionists wouldn't meet his eyes. He marched into his office only to find Greg waiting for him. Greg was a heavy-set man who usually wore a jovial expression. Today he looked like an executioner. "Greg," Harrison said, forcing a smile. "Rough night. You wouldn't believe the drama. But listen, I've got an in with Sinclair now that nobody else has." "My wife—" "Your wife," Greg interrupted, his voice flat. "Sent a legal team over at 8:00 a.m. Harrison froze. "What?" "Sinclair Enterprises is conducting a vendor audit," Greg said, tossing a thick file onto the desk. "They're reviewing every subcontractor they work with, including us and Harrison. They flagged us for ethical non-compliance and conflict of interest due to nepotism concerns." "Nepotism," Harrison sputtered. "I'm her husband." "Exactly," Greg shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. "They froze our accounts pending investigation. And since you're the conflict, the board met an hour ago." Harrison felt the room spin. "The board? It's just you, me, and silent investors." "The investors spoke," Greg said, looking away. "You're out, Harrison. Effective immediately. We can't have Pembroke Logistics associated with the guy who humiliated the new CEO of Sinclair Enterprises on live television. The video is everywhere. You're radioactive. You can't do this. I built this company. You built it on debt and charisma," Greg shot back. "And now you have neither. Pack your box. Security will escort you out." Harrison stumbled out of the building 15 minutes later, holding a cardboard box containing a stapler, a photo frame face down, and a cactus. He stood on the sidewalk, the noise of the city washing over him. He had one card left to play. Isabella Vance. She had been humiliated too. Surely she wanted revenge. Surely she could help him get back in. They were allies. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number. "The number you have reached has been disconnected or is no longer in service." He stared at the phone. She had burned the bridge before he even stepped on it. Harrison felt a surge of rage. This wasn't fair. He was a good businessman. He deserved a seat at the table. Amelia was just being vindictive. "She wants a war," he hissed to the empty street. "I'll give her a war." Meanwhile, in the penthouse office of the Sinclair building, a glass spire that pierced the clouds, Amelia sat behind a desk that was larger than her entire Queen's living room. The office was stark, modern, and intimidating. But Amelia had already made changes. She had opened the blinds to let the natural light in. She had placed a single battered copy of The Great Gatsby on the desk, a reminder of the emptiness of wealth without substance. Arthur Sinclair sat on a leather sofa nearby, watching her with a mix of awe and trepidation. "You know," Arthur said, "you don't have to read every single line item of the acquisition reports. That's what we have analysts for." Amelia didn't look up from the documents. She held a red pen, and she was using it liberally. "Archivists look at the details, Arthur. If you miss a comma in a manuscript, you change the history. If you miss a zero in a ledger, you lose a fortune. Look at this." She spun the laptop around. "Why is the marketing budget for the Vance division 3 times higher than the logistics budget?" Arthur frowned. "Marcus handles that division. He says it's necessary for brand awareness." "It's necessary for his lifestyle," Amelia corrected. "I cross-referenced the expenses. Consulting fees paid to shell companies in the Caymans. Venue rentals for parties that never happened." Arthur's face darkened. "Are you sure?" "I traced the paper trail," Amelia said calmly. "Marcus isn't just incompetent, Dad. He's stealing from you." Just then the heavy oak doors swung open. Marcus Vance strode in, looking disheveled but trying to project confidence. He was holding a bouquet of white lilies. "Amelia, cousin," Marcus boomed, ignoring the icy stare from Arthur. "I wanted to welcome you properly. Last night was a shock, but family is family, right?" He placed the flowers on the desk. Amelia looked at them, then at him. "I'm allergic to lilies, Marcus," she said softly. "But then you'd know that if you ever cared to know anything about me." Marcus's smile faltered. "Right. Sorry. Look, I know you're new to this. Business is a rough game. I wanted to offer my mentorship, help you navigate the shark tank." Amelia stood up. She wasn't wearing her thrift store dress today. She was wearing a tailored navy suit that cost more than Harrison's car. She looked every inch the CEO. "I don't need a mentor, Marcus," she said. "I need an explanation." She slid the report across the desk. "Explain why $2 million of company funds were transferred to a consulting firm registered in your girlfriend's name." Marcus turned pale. He looked at Arthur. "Uncle Arthur, surely you don't believe she's just reading it wrong. She doesn't understand corporate finance." Arthur stood up, his face like thunder. "She understands that you've been treating my company like your personal piggy bank. I stayed silent because you were family, Marcus. But Amelia is family too, and she's the boss." "Get out," Amelia said, her voice dropping an octave. "Security is waiting to escort you, and Marcus, don't leave town. The legal department will be in touch." Marcus looked between them, realized the game was up, and fled the room, leaving the lilies wilting on the desk. Arthur let out a long breath. "I should have done that years ago." "You were lonely," Amelia said, her tone softening. "Grief makes us blind." "And what about you?" Arthur asked gently. "Are you blind to Harrison?" Amelia picked up the red pen again. She stared at the tip. "No, I saw him clearly for the first time last night, and now I'm going to make sure he sees me." "He's been calling the main line," Arthur noted, "claiming he has rights to your assets." "Let him call," Amelia said, a dangerous glint in her eye. "I'm not done with Harrison Pembroke yet. He wanted to be part of the Sinclair story, fine. I'll give him a chapter he'll never forget." 3 days later, Harrison sat in a dive bar in Hell's Kitchen. It was 11 a.m. He was nursing a whiskey and staring at the news on the TV above the bar. "Sinclair. Stock soars under new leadership." The ticker read, "Marcus Vance indicted for embezzlement." Harrison let out a bitter laugh. Everyone was getting what they deserved, apparently. Except him. He was the victim here. He was the husband who had been duped. Why wasn't the media interviewing him? His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. It buzzed again immediately. He picked it up. What? Mr. Pembroke, a crisp female voice. This is Charlotte Hale, legal counsel for Amelia Sinclair. Harrison sat up straighter, knocking over a salt shaker. Finally, I want to talk to her. Tell her I'm ready to negotiate. I know my rights. Half of everything is mine. We didn't sign a prenup. Ms. Sinclair would like to meet with you, the lawyer said, ignoring his outburst, to discuss the terms of your separation. I'm not signing anything until I see a number with 6 zeros, Harrison snarled. Please come to the Sinclair estate in the Hamptons, tonight at 7:00 p.m. Do not be late. The line went dead. Harrison smiled. The Hamptons estate. That was neutral ground. It meant she was ready to settle. She wanted him quiet. She knew he could ruin her perfect heiress image with a few tell-all interviews. He spent the rest of the day grooming. He shaved borrowed money from a neighbor to get his suit dry cleaned and rented a decent car using a credit card that was maxed out but hadn't been declined yet. He arrived at the estate just as the sun was setting. It was a sprawling mansion on the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic. The driveway was lined with ancient oaks. It smelled of money and power. This should have been mine, Harrison thought as he parked. This is the life I was owed. A butler opened the door and led him into the library. It was a massive room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a roaring fire. Amelia was standing by the fireplace, her back to him. "Amelia," Harrison said, putting on his most charming, repentant voice. He walked in arms open. "Baby, I've been so worried. This whole thing, it's gotten out of hand. The media, the pressure, it made us crazy." Amelia turned around. She held a glass of red wine. She looked calm, regal, and utterly detached. "Sit down, Harrison," she said. She didn't offer him a drink. Harrison sat in a leather wing-back chair. "Look, I know I said some things at the gala. I was stressed. I was trying to impress those sharks for us, for our future." "For us," Amelia repeated, testing the words. "Is that why you opened a secret credit line in my name 3 years ago to fund your first office lease?" Harrison blinked. That was an investment." "Is that why?" She continued, picking up a file from the mantelpiece. "You spent $6,000 on dinners with Isabella Vance in the last 2 months alone, while telling me we couldn't afford to fix the heater in the apartment." Harrison's mouth went dry. "Business dinners. Amelia, you don't understand networking." "I understand, Math Harrison," she said, dropping the file on the table between them. "I've spent the last 3 days auditing my life. It's what I do. I restore the truth." She walked over to the desk and leaned against it. "I found the emails, Harrison, between you and Marcus Vance." Harrison froze. The blood drained from his face. "Marcus," he squeaked. "You were going to sell me out," Amelia said, her voice devoid of emotion, which was far scarier than screaming. "You emailed Marcus a month ago. You offered to introduce him to an archivist who could forge provenance documents for his illegal antique exports. You were going to use me to help him smuggle stolen goods. I didn't think you'd actually do it. I just needed the introduction fee," Harrison stammered. "I was going to tell you eventually. You were pimping out my skills to a criminal," Amelia said. "And you didn't even know I was his cousin. You just saw me as a resource to be exploited. Amelia, please. I'm your husband. We can work past this. I can change. I can be the man you need for this company. Imagine us power couple of New York. Amelia laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. You still don't get it, she said. You think this meeting is about saving our marriage? Isn't it? Harrison, look at the papers on the table. Harrison looked down. It wasn't a divorce settlement. It was a stack of financial documents with the Sinclair letterhead. What is this? I bought your debt, Amelia said simply. Pembroke Logistics. You took out 3 high-interest loans to keep the company afloat last year. You used the company assets as collateral. The bank was about to foreclose. How did you know? I bought the notes from the bank this morning, Amelia said. I'm now the sole creditor of Pembroke Logistics. I own your debt. I own your office lease. I own your brand. Harrison stared at her horror dawning on him. You own my company. And since you are in default, Amelia continued, I am calling in the loan immediately. I can't pay. You know I can't pay. Exactly, Amelia said. Which means I am seizing the assets. Pembroke Logistics is being liquidated as of tomorrow morning. Harrison jumped to his feet. You can't do this. That's my life's work. No, Amelia said, her voice hard as steel. Your life's work was pretending to be something you're not. Your life's work was belittling the woman who cooked your meals, cleaned your clothes, and paid your rent while you played CEO. She took a sip of wine. I'm not taking your company because I want it, Harrison. It's worthless. I'm taking it so you understand what it feels like to have absolutely nothing. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a single envelope. She tossed it onto the pile of debt papers. And those, she said, are the divorce papers. Sign them. If you do, I'll forgive the personal debt you accrued in my name. If you fight me, I'll make sure the IRS takes a very close look at those business dinners with Isabella. Harrison looked at the papers, then at Amelia. He saw no love in her eyes, no pity. Only the cold, hard resolution of a woman who had finally realized her own worth. He picked up the pen. His hand trembled. Amelia, he whispered, I loved you. No, Harrison, she said, turning back to the fire. You loved a mirror. You just wanted someone to stand there and reflect your own ego back at you. But I'm not a mirror anymore. She heard the scratch of the pen on paper. Get out, she said. Harrison stood up. He left the papers on the table. He walked to the door, a broken man. As he reached the handle, he turned back one last time. What will you do now? He asked. With all this... Amelia watched the flames dance in the hearth. I'm going to build something real, she said. Harrison walked out into the night. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind him, a sound final and absolute. He was alone in the dark, and for the first time in his life, he had no one to blame but himself. 1 year later, the New York skyline looked the same, but the landscape of power within it had shifted tectonically. It was a Tuesday afternoon, raining a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked into the bones. On Fifth Avenue, a delivery truck idled illegally in a loading zone. The driver hopped out, struggling with a heavy, awkward parcel wrapped in brown paper. The driver was Harrison Pembroke. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a brown uniform with a name tag that read, Harry. He had lost weight, but not in the flattering, gym-sculpted way he used to aspire to. He looked tired. The arrogance that had once fueled his stride was gone, replaced by the frantic hustle of a man paid by the delivery. Hey, move it or ticket it, a traffic cop shouted. I'm going. Harrison yelled back, hoisting the box onto his shoulder. He checked the address on the scanner. Sinclair Tower, 40th floor, executive suite. Harrison froze. He stared at the device, rain dripping off the brim of his cap. Fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. He almost threw the box back in the truck. He could quit. He could drive away. But he couldn't. He needed this job. After Pembroke Logistics collapsed, his credit score had cratered. The networking friends he had cultivated vanished the moment the money did. He was living in a studio apartment in New Jersey that smelled of damp carpet. He took a deep breath, lowered his head, and walked into the building he had once thought he would rule. The lobby was transformed. The cold corporate marble was now interspersed with warm wood accents and glass displays, showcasing historical artifacts, part of Amelia's new corporate heritage initiative. Harrison signed in at the desk. The security guard didn't recognize him. To the world, Harrison Pembroke was already forgotten. He took the freight elevator up. It rattled and hummed, a stark contrast to the silent, swift executive lifts. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, he stepped into a hive of activity. It wasn't the chaotic, fear-driven workplace of the old regime. It was focused, calm. "Delivery for Sinclair," Harrison muttered to the receptionist, keeping his cap pulled low. "Just leave it there, thanks," she said without looking up. As Harrison set the box down, the double doors to the main conference room opened. A group of executives walked out, laughing. At the center of the group was Amelia. She looked breathtaking. She wore a cream-colored suit that radiated authority. Her hair was cut shorter, sharper. She was holding a tablet, discussing renewable shipping lanes with a man who looked like a senator. Harrison shrank back against the wall, praying to be invisible. "The archival project is ahead of schedule," Amelia was saying, her voice clear and resonant. "We've recovered 90% of the company's founding documents. It turns out transparency is actually profitable. Who knew?" The group chuckled. Amelia stopped. She frowned slightly, sensing something. She turned her head, her eyes scanning the reception area. Her gaze swept over the delivery man, huddled by the wall. Harrison stopped breathing. "Don't look at me," he pleaded silently. "Please don't see me like this." Amelia's eyes lingered on him for a second. There was a flash of recognition, a flicker of the past. Harrison braced himself for the confrontation. He expected her to point him out, to laugh, to show her executives the loser ex-husband who was now hauling her mail. But Amelia didn't speak. She didn't smile. She simply looked at him with a profound, terrifying indifference. It wasn't anger. It was the look one gives a piece of furniture that is slightly out of place. Then she turned back to the senator. "Shall we continue in my office? I want to show you the blueprints." She walked away. Harrison stood there, his heart hammering against his ribs. She hadn't mocked him. She hadn't even acknowledged him. He realized then that he wasn't a villain in her story anymore. He wasn't even a footnote. He was nothing. He turned and walked back to the freight elevator, the emptiness in his chest heavier than any box he would ever carry. Inside the office, Arthur Sinclair watched his daughter. He had seen the delivery man, too. He knew exactly who it was. "You let him go," Arthur observed quietly as the door closed. "I have a meeting, Dad," Amelia said, sitting at her desk. "I don't have time for ghosts." "You're tougher than I ever was," Arthur said, shaking his head with a mix of pride and slight fear. "Marcus is in federal prison. Harrison is delivering packages. You've cleaned House Millie." "I didn't put Marcus in prison," Amelia corrected, opening her laptop. "The FBI did. And I didn't give Harrison that job. He earned it." She looked out the window at the city below. I just stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own actions, she said. That's all I did. I let gravity do the rest. And what about you? Arthur asked. Are you happy? Amelia paused. She touched the spine of the book on her desk, a first edition of the Odyssey she had recently restored. I'm busy, Arthur, she said, and for now, that's enough. 6 months later, the Sinclair Winter Solstice Gala arrived again. The Plaza Hotel was just as glittering, the paparazzi just as frenzied, but the vibe inside the ballroom was different. The air of desperate climbing was gone, replaced by a sense of celebration. Amelia stood on the stage where her father had stood a year and a half ago. This time she wasn't the surprise guest. She was the host. She wore a gown of deep emerald green, a nod to the old-world elegance she loved. The room was packed not just with billionaires, but with artists, historians, and scientists. She had diversified the guest list. Welcome, Amelia said into the microphone. Her voice commanded the room effortlessly. Tonight we celebrate the launch of the Sinclair Foundation for Preservation. We are committing $50 million to the restoration of endangered historical sites. Applause rippled through the room. But before we begin, Amelia said, raising a hand, I want to acknowledge someone. The room went quiet. Was there another twist? Another hidden heir? Amelia looked down at the front table. Arthur Sinclair sat there looking frail but happy. My father, Amelia said. He built the ship. I'm just steering it. But it took us a long time to learn that a ship needs both a captain and a navigator, to fathers and daughters. She raised her glass. And to second chances. The crowd toasted. As the music started, a lively jazz band, not a somber quartet. Amelia walked down the stairs. She moved through the crowd, shaking hands, genuinely smiling. She wasn't playing a role anymore. She was exactly who she was supposed to be. Near the back of the room by the kitchen doors, a young woman in a simple off-the-rack dress was standing nervously. She looked terrified, clutching her purse, clearly feeling out of place among the couture gowns. Her date, a young man who looked equally nervous, was whispering to her, trying to comfort her. Amelia stopped. She remembered the feeling of the cheap fabric against her skin. She remembered the heat of the kitchen vents and the sting of being invisible. She changed course and walked straight toward the young couple. The young woman's eyes went wide as the CEO of Sinclair Enterprises approached her. Oh my God, she whispered. I'm sorry, are we in the way? Not at all, Amelia said warmly. I just wanted to tell you that I love your dress. The color is perfect on you. The girl blushed crimson. Really? It was on sale. The best finds always are. Amelia winked. You have a great eye. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. She signaled a waiter. Make sure these two have a great view of the stage, please. Table 12 is open. As the waiter led the stunned couple to a prime table, Amelia watched them go. Arthur appeared at her elbow. That was nice of you. I know what it's like, Amelia said softly. To be the smartest person in the room and have everyone treat you like the poorest. You were never poor, Millie, Arthur said. You were just waiting to be found. No, Dad. Amelia smiled, looking at the room she now commanded. I was waiting to be seen, and I finally realized I didn't need Harrison or you or anyone else to do it. I had to see myself first. She took her father's arm. Now, she said, let's go eat. I heard the soufflés are actually perfect this year. The camera pans out as Amelia and Arthur walk into the crowd, the flashbulbs popping not as assaults, but as stars capturing a woman who had turned her tragedy into a triumph. So what do you think Harrison thought value was about the price tag on a suit? but he learned the hard way that real worth comes from character. Amelia didn't just inherit a company, she inherited her self-respect, and that was the biggest fortune of all. If you enjoyed this story of karma betrayal and sweet redemption, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. We post new stories every week that prove that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should be most afraid of. What would you have done if you were Amelia? Would you have forgiven Harrison, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.